Forget what you've learned about World War I. It wasn't just fought with bullets and trenches or planes in the skies. There was another war, an invisible one, waged in bank vaults, behind oak doors, and across humming telegraph wires. While soldiers were dying in the mud, a different kind of army bankers, traders, and politicians was silently deciding who would win long before the guns fell silent. In 1914, when Europe exploded into conflict, everyone thought artillery would decide history. But the real power didn't belong to the generals. It belonged to the moneylenders who could keep the guns firing when everyone else was running on empty. By 1918, the victors weren't just nations. They were the ones who had mastered this secret battlefield of finance. This is the story of how money won the Great War. When the war began, every major power expected a quick fight. They planned for weeks, maybe a few months. But by Christmas, a horrifying reality set in. This war was going to devour everything men, steel, and above all money. Britain, the wealthiest empire in history, started strong. Its gold reserves were vast, its navy unstoppable. But even Britain's treasure could outfund a war that was costing £5 million a day. That's an insane amount of money. Even now, within months, the treasury's vaults were running dry. So London turned to its greatest weapon, and it wasn't a battleship. It was the City of London, the financial heart of the world. Behind the fog and iron gates of Threadneedle Street, the Bank of England began orchestrating the largest financial operation in human history. It issued war bonds, promising citizens and colonies that their savings could save civilization. Posters screamed, "Lend to defend the right," and millions obeyed. Housewives traded wedding rings for bonds. Factory workers saved their pennies for the cause. The war wasn't just being fought. It was being funded by pure belief. Meanwhile, across the ocean, another empire was stirring. America was officially neutral, but its bankers were anything but. Young Wall Street firms, with J.P. Morgan leading the charge, saw the opportunity of a lifetime, the chance to finance both the war and the peace that would follow. The Morgan firm became the British government's exclusive purchasing agent in the United States. Think about that. One private bank was handling all of Britain's war shopping. They managed over $12 billion in contracts, an astronomical sum back then, enough to build an entire nation from scratch. While Europe was bleeding out, Wall Street was quietly transforming from a regional player into a global kingmaker. When the United States finally entered the war in 1917, it didn't just bring soldiers. It brought the Federal Reserve, a brand new central bank, barely 3 years old, ready for its first major test. The Fed coordinated massive bond sales, managed foreign exchange rates, and fought to stabilize wartime inflation. For the first time, America learned that wars could be won not just with rifles, but with printing presses. From this fiery trial, a modern truth emerged. Every great war from then on would first be won or lost in the world of money. But this financial war had its own casualties. For every banker who got rich, millions of ordinary people had their lives shattered. By 1916, European governments had mortgaged their futures. Gold flowed across the Atlantic like a tide of defeat. Britain's mighty pound sterling, the world's anchor currency for a century, began to shake. The French franc collapsed under mountains of debt. And Germany? Blockaded, isolated, and desperate, it began financing its war in a new, dangerous way, by creating money out of thin air. The Reichsbank printed marks at a terrifying rate, promising that victory would make them valuable again. But victory never came, and when the war ended, those paper promises turned to ash. By the early 1920s, the German mark was worth less than the paper it was printed on. A loaf of bread cost a wheelbarrow full of cash. Families burned banknotes just to stay warm. That collapse didn't just destroy wealth. It destroyed faith. It destroyed an entire society, paving the way for extremism and a second, even darker war. The financial decisions made in 1916 led directly to the horrors of the 1930s and 40s. Across the Atlantic, America had transformed. It went from being a debtor nation to the world's creditor. Gold flooded into New York's vaults. The dollar replaced the pound as the global measure of value. Wall Street, not London, now decided who got to rebuild and who would be left in ruins. But this victory came with a cost even America couldn't foresee. Farmers who had borrowed heavily to expand during the war now faced collapsing prices. The post-war boom turned into a brutal bust. By 1929, the very same financial forces that had fueled the war triggered a new catastrophe: the Great Depression. The masters of money may have won the war, but they couldn't control the peace. Now for some of the lesser-known stories from this financial battlefield. It wasn't all just cold, hard numbers. As the Kaiser's armies retreated in 1918, trains loaded with Germany's gold reserves vanished into the mountains. Some say they were hidden to finance underground movements. Others claim they were stolen by opportunists. To this day, the full fate of that gold remains one of the war's great unsolved mysteries. And look at the New York skyline. Many of the iconic skyscrapers that defined 1920s Manhattan, the Chrysler Building, the Empire State Building, were financed with profits from wartime contracts. The war that bankrupted Europe literally built the skyline of modern America. The war also changed society in unexpected ways. When men went to the front, women took over the financial home front. They bought war bonds, managed family businesses, and entered the world of banking for the first time. The war didn't just reshape borders. It reshaped gender roles, laying the foundations for social revolutions to come. But here's the final brutal twist. Britain, once the world's banker, ended the war owing the United States over $4 billion, a debt it would struggle to repay for the next 2 decades. The empire that had ruled the world through finance became a debtor empire, practically overnight. History rarely turns so sharply and so silently. By the end of the war, more than just empires had fallen. The very idea of money as something stable and real had collapsed. Before 1914, the world operated on the gold standard, a promise that your paper money could always be exchanged for real, physical gold. It was a world of certainty. But by 1918, that illusion was gone. Governments had learned they could create wealth and debt with the stroke of a pen. The genie was out of the bottle and it was never going back in. The century that followed has been defined by this shift. From the Great Depression to Bretton Woods, from the oil crises to the 2008 meltdown, every major event carries the echo of that first hidden battle. Every modern conflict, whether fought over energy, currency, or technology, begins with the control of credit and confidence. Whoever controls belief, controls value. And whoever controls value, controls history. So what can we learn from the financiers of 1914? First, understand the battlefield. Money isn't neutral. It's a weapon. In every crisis, someone is quietly financing the chaos and someone else is profiting from it. Second, watch the quiet moves. Wars begin with a lot of noise, but they end in silence. The biggest shifts happen not on the battlefield, but in boardrooms, when debts are forgiven, currencies are revalued, and empires are quietly sold off. And finally, remember this. Confidence is the only true currency. In 1914, people bought war bonds out of faith in victory, faith in their nation, faith in the future. When that faith broke, entire societies collapsed. The same is true today. Markets rise and fall on confidence, not on metal. The Great War officially ended in 1918, but its financial front never closed. Each generation fights it again, in recessions, sanctions, and now, with digital currencies. The names have changed. Morgan and Rothschild have been replaced by algorithms and central banks. But the weapons are the same: debt, credit, and belief. Some say the next world war won't be fought with missiles, but with markets. If that's true, then the hidden financial battle of World War I wasn't just history. It was the opening chapter of the war we're still fighting today. Thanks for watching. If you found this look into the hidden side of history interesting, please hit that like button and subscribe for more. We'll see you in the next one.